Hey boys and girls, welcome back to Kuni. In this episode, it may be after the finale, but I did promise to read all the fairy tales, so we'll do that real quick. Also, I wanted to notice what Derwin was talking about over here. Your help in advancing the cause of science has not gone unnoticed, you know. I think we'll find the ultimate secrets of the animal kingdom sooner than we expected, thanks to you. Cool. Okay, well, it's time to read some fairy tales. We'll go right down the list. Okay. Well, we'll do the Cowardly Prince again, since it's been quite a while. The first tale, The Cowardly Prince and the Lion. The Cowardly Prince. In a certain country In a certain country there lived a prince named Tamalo, who was sharp of mind but weak of spirit. His father was a brave king, strong, wise, and loved by the subjects, but the noble example he set served only to weaken Tamalo's spirit. On the occasion his father told him thus, "Soon, my boy, it shall be time for me to retire, upon which thou shalt become king." While the announcement delighted the prince, it filled him also with such a terrible dread, for he did not have the spirit required to ascend the throne. In his vexation he wandered from the castle, lost in thought, whereupon he encountered a fearsome-looking lion. The prince tried to flee, but the lion caught him easily in his paw, lifted him to his gaping mouth, and swallowed him whole. At first At first the prince thought he was doomed, but at length he began to reconsider his position. "At least, I no longer have to become king," thought the prince. After taking a deep breath, he said to the lion, "Mighty lion, I am prince of this country. In the day after tomorrow I was due to become its king. Since thou hast now swallowed me, however, thou must needs become king instead." "King, eh?" replied the lion. "I shan't complain about that." Thereupon the prince led the lion back to the palace. The courtiers were shocked to see a lion enter the palace, but the prince pleaded with them from inside his stomach, and the lion was accepted as king. The lion proved to have quite an aptitude for royal duties. Whensoever there was a dispute in his kingdom, the lion would simply growl at the quarrelers. "Stop complaining, or I shall eat you alive." Whensoever a bridge was swept away by a flood, the lion would simply use his paws to rip down a tree and lay it across the river. Regarding taxation and legal matters, the lion was utterly ignorant. But whensoever such a problem arose, Prince Tamalo would speak to him from inside his stomach and provide him with a sound solution. 2 dragons. After some time the news had reached the king that 2 dragons were ravaging the eastern and western edges of his kingdom. The people were terrified and looked to their king to deliver them from this terrible evil, upon which the king announced that he should go and smite the dragons himself. But even the fearsome lion stood no chance of defeating 2 such terrible dragons. "My dear stomach dweller," said he then, "what in the wide world should I do now?" Prince Tamalo considered the lion's question and at length provided him with a suitable scheme. The lion headed east to the part of the kingdom that was being ravaged by the larger dragon, and it roared in its ugly face. "Dragon, I shall soon slay thee. I fear thee not, for no matter how large thou art, thou shalt never devour me." "Oh ho," scoffed the dragon, "we'll see about that." Upon which he ate the lion whole. From inside the dragon's stomach, the lion said, "Dragon, thou art now the king of this land. It is therefore thy royal duty to defeat the dragon ravaging the western part of the kingdom." At first the dragon paid him no heed, but then the dragon witnessed the humans around him bowing down in deference, as Prince Tamalo had requested them to do beforehand. He decided to do his royal duty, whereupon he went to the western mountain and slew the other dragon. Once the other dragon had been slain, the lion commenced to scratching the inside of the dragon's stomach. "Ow, it hurts," cried the dragon, rolling on the floor in agony. "Have mercy, I beseech thee." To which the lion said, If thou wouldst not feel this pain, thou must promise never to hurt the people of this kingdom." "Oh, very well, I promise," cried the dragon in reply. But the dragon was a cunning beast, and Prince Tamalo knew that he wouldn't break his promise the moment the lion was out of his stomach. He therefore had the lion take out the babbling berry he told him to bring with him and place it inside the dragon. The berry was known for making noises that sounded like someone muttering to himself. With that babbling berry in his stomach, the dragon shan't notice that the lion escapes. Now, thought Prince Tamalo. Later that night, when the dragon was sleeping, the lion crept out of his gaping mouth and set off back to the palace. The dragon left the king and his subject alone evermore. A new king. The kingdom had been at peace for 10 years, when the lion said to the Prince Tamalo, "Stomach dweller, it's time thou camest hence from in there. I would have thee take my place on the throne." Prince Tamalo was shocked, and replied in a quivering tone, "I fear that I do not have the spirit to become king, but thy judgments over the past 10 years have invariably been wise," said the lion. "That is as may be, but I am a coward," replied Prince Tamalo. "It was only because I was protected by a great strong lion that I could act so decisively." Yet the lion paid no heed. With an almighty sneeze, he ejected Prince Tamalo from his stomach. It had been 10 years since Prince Tamalo seen the wide world outside, and he could not believe his eyes. The lion's mane was now full white, and his face was covered in wrinkles. Shut up inside the lion's stomach, Prince Tamalo had been quite unaware of any of this. "As thou canst see with thine own eyes," said the lion, "I have grown old. 10 years hast thou resided in my stomach, and yet not once didst thou scratch me, or cause me any pain, as myself did to that dragon, though thou couldst have done at any time. The courtiers and subjects of this kingdom did not accept me because I am strong. They accepted me because I have given them my all, by which I mean thou hast given them thine. Thou art the true king of this country. Thou lackest not the spirit, I assure thee." In like manner, everyone at the palace beseeched Prince Tamalo to become their king. Prince Tamalo, everyone is humbly grateful for everything thou hast done. Our country needeth such a king as thee." Upon hearing these words, Prince Tamalo felt his courage swell up within him. As King, Tamalo gave still more of himself to his country, and despite the fact that the lion had retired, he continued to live alongside the king in the palace. Though many countries are ruled by animals these days, in the ancient times, all kings were human. Indeed, the magnificent lion about whom you just read was the first ever animal to be acknowledged as king, and the world has never been the same since. The second tale, Squirrels in the Bramble, Protectors of the Forest. Once upon a time, the whole world was lush and green, and covered in countless forests. In the mild days of spring, children would play in their clearings, making necklaces from wild flowers, while in summer they would shelter from the sun underneath their ancient trees. And in autumn, of course, they would pick and eat their juicy fruits. Indeed, the forests have always been important to youngsters, being carefree places in which to play with gay abandon. But what do you know of the forest guardians? Every forest has one, and they are believed to be godlike creatures that protect the woods they inhabit, as well as all the creatures that dwell within. But how do the guardians come into existence? No human knows for certain, of course, but it is believed that somehow selected from amongst the creatures that live in the forest naturally, since the guardian is responsible for protecting all the forest inhabitants. The biggest, strongest creature in the forest is usually the one selected. There has, however, been one notable exception, as related in this well-known fable. A proclamation from the deities of the forest. A forest luxuriant with leaves was home to a gently flowing river in spring produced fresh water, and all the beasts that lived inside there in amity, from tiny insects to creatures as big as 2 men. One day, the deities of the forest made a proclamation. The time has come for you to choose your guardian, for forests did not have a guardian at the time. As soon as the message was received, a controversy prevailed among the beasts of the forest, with each one claiming that he would make the best guardian. These sharp fangs will frighten away any enemy, growled the black wolf. These huge claws will shred impostors to pieces, roared the gray bear. And so it continued, with every large forest animal boasting about his own case, from the stag with his own great antlers, to the white catfish who dwelt in the spring. The forest's small inhabitants, those who had no chance of winning any test or of strength, could but watch this assembly of beasts in silence. The bickering continued for several nights, until one day a golden haze descended upon the forest, bringing with it an aroma so sweet that the beasts soon forgot about choosing a guardian and simply spent the day in contented days, staring at the new golden coloring of the trees around them. The very next day, however, crimson saplings sprouted from some of the trees, and quickly grew into a large tangle of red bramble, for the golden haze the beasts had so enjoyed was, in fact, a cloud of evil-disposed spores. By the time any of them noticed, however, the bramble had covered the entire forest. The bramble strangled tree after tree, causing them to wither and die. It seemed only a matter of time before the entire forest would be quite devoid of life. Thus the wise owl said, "Somewhere in this forest, the tree in which the spores first took root, the tree is the source of the terrible bramble. Cut off its source, and the entire thicket will melt." Desperate to save the forest, the black wolf and the gray bear resolved to find the tree, and the wise owl had mentioned. However, the bramble had grown so thick and so dense that their great bodies simply would not pass through it. In time for the smaller forest creatures to come to the fore, the ones who abstained while the other beasts had bickered and boasted about who was the strongest. And so the mottled snake slithered through the bramble, moving deep into the forest in search of the tree where the first spores took root. "Alas, the bramble wraps the tree completely," hissed the snake. "We shall need to cut through it somehow, but I have neither claws nor teeth, only this forked tongue." Upon hearing the mottled snake's report, the blue woodpecker leapt into action. "I shall peck through the bramble in no time," he chirped with confidence. But as soon as he neared the tree with the mottled snake had described, the bramble became too thick, and he was quite unable to spread his wings and let alone fly close enough to peck at the bramble, unless he went back dejected. That was when the field mice and the squirrels rendered their assistance. "These sturdy front teeth of ours shall gnaw through the bramble," squeaked the field mice. "But the bramble goes all the way to the top of the tree," observed the squirrels. "Can you truly climb so high?" The field mice had conceded that they could not, and so it was the squirrels who set off to cut the bramble that surrounded the tree that had been the first to succumb. The squirrels soon reached the tree and scaled it with ease. In no time at all, they were nibbling at the bramble and making light work of cutting through it. No sooner had they begun to chew their way through the bramble than large parts of the thicket that covered the forest fell away and withered, and so the squirrels decided to continue nibbling until the tree was completely free of the bramble. Alas, the bramble contained poison spores, and the squirrels who swallowed them soon felt the effects and fell lifeless onto the forest floor. And yet this did not deter the other brave squirrels, who had resolved to rid the tree of the bramble and save the forest at any cost. And each of them continued to chew. The moment the last bramble was cut, and the entire tangle withered away. The last remaining squirrel fell from the tree, dashing its head upon the ground. The squirrels had saved the forest. When the black wolf and gray bear were finally able to wade through the dead bramble, they came across the bodies of the dead squirrels and let out terrifying cries. The guardian. As animals rang out, the squirrels' souls floated from the bodies so pure as orbs of light. The black wolf and gray bear watched the amazement of the orbs floated into the hollow in the tree, bringing it back to life. The deities of the forest had spoken. The squirrels were the forest's true guardians. Though they were amongst the smallest of and weakest of the beasts, their courage was greater than all the largest creatures. Size has no bearing on a creature's stature. The third tale. The fairy who wouldn't stop crying. The teary fairy. Sit tight, boys and girls. I got a story to tell you. A fairy tale, if you like. Fairies like me used to be 10 a penny, see? But you'd be hard-pressed to find one these days. Always on the move we are. Anyways, this story's about a very special fairy. And while it all happened a long time ago, the fairy's still going strong today. Or so I hope, anyway. Right then, let's get cracking, ain't it? The story's about a little fairy who wouldn't stop crying, sobbing he was, day and night. Now us fairies are hell of impressionable, especially when we're little. We learn all sorts of tidy tricks from other fairies, but we can pick up bad habits just as easy. I don't know whose miserable mug this poor dab saw when he first popped out into the world, but it must have been proper tragic, because the first thing he ever did in his life was cry, and then he kept on crying. Now it's not like this fire wanted to be spouting tears all the time. He just couldn't help himself. Every time it got dark, he'd well up. Like blinking clockwork he was. What's more, young fairies can be hell of a cruel. This little cry fairy got roped to something terrible, all of which just made him want to cry even more, of course. The puddle of tears. One day, a traveling wizard happened to spot this fairy standing next to a puddle of tears. He was proper knackered, this wizard, and hell of a thirsty. So what he did was he took a drink from the puddle, ain't it? There's lovely, he thought, felt 10 times better straight away. Then off he went with a spring in his step and got on with his wizardly work. A bit later, when everything was done, he decided to go back and thank the fairy. But the tears he drank, but when he came back, the puddle was even bigger than before. "Oh, fairy," he said, in this grand old voice, "why do you cry so much? I've been gone 3 days, and you still you weep." "Sob," said the fairy. "Scared I am, like scared of the dark. I don't know what to do about it." After a few more sobs, he went on, "And everyone makes fun of me, good for nothing. I'm life's rubbish." And with that, he went back to sobbing. "I see," said the wise old wizard, stroking his big white beard. "Perhaps a lantern is what you need." So he whips this tidy lantern out of his cloak and plonks it on the head of the fairy's nose. Right. Now the light from the lantern made the fairy blink like mad, but it didn't half cheer him up, and sure enough, he stopped crying. Felt like he'd been born again, he did. "You see, little fairy," said the wizard, "you shall never be in the dark again, no matter where you go." I'm not scared anymore," said the fairy. The fairy gasped, cracking the first smile in his whole entire life. "And you are no longer good for nothing either," laughed the wizard. "That smile of yours will bring comfort to a great many people. Come with me, and I shall show you." So the fairy packed up his dabs in a little bag and went off with the wizard. They had some pretty hair-raising adventures and all, but the fairy never once got scared. He had the lantern on the end of his nose, see? And even after he parted ways with the kindly wizard, he never cried again, and the light on his nose is still shining to this day. Have a look around you, like he might be right nearby. Well, what do you say? Proper tidy tell, wasn't it? I bet you've got a tear in your eye now. A little story about Drippy, and a little backstory about him. The fourth tale, The Bear Man and the Princess's Tears. A kidnapped princess. The king of a peaceful kingdom had one daughter, whom he loved very much. This princess was very brave and very wise, and assisted her father in ruling the kingdom. Hard by the edge of the kingdom was a steep mountain. No one had ever approached it. However, for it was known that a witch lived in the cave at its foot. This witch had long had an inclination to rule the kingdom herself, but the fearless princess never failed to foil her plans. The witch had an apprentice who was top half a bear and bottom half man. This apprentice was known as the Bear Man, for that was his name, and was fearsomely strong, but very dull-witted. Always carried out the witch's command to the letter. One day the Bear Man was in the cave making a potion when the witch returned with the young woman. It was, guess, the princess who was always ruining her plans. The Bear Man looked at the princess and was twice shocked, firstly at how wondrously fair she was, and secondly at the sight of her hands and feet, which the witch had turned to wood using magic. Look after the princess, the witch commanded, and the Bear Man do not let her get hungry or shed a single tear, or else there shall be trouble. The Bear Man immediately went to fetch some fruits and preserves from the larder. Since the princess's hands had been turned to wood, the Bear Man tried to put the fruit in her mouth directly, but the princess turned away from him and looked instead at the witch. "What will you do with me?" "I shall tell your father that I have taken you hostage," the witch replied, and demand his kingdom in return for your freedom." "That would be a waste of time," retorted the princess. "Father is always telling me not to believe in anything witches say. He will not trust you, even if I am in mortal danger." "Silence," shrieked the witch, and with a wave of her hand she cursed the princess, who became quite unable to speak. The witch had stolen her voice. The Bear Man's duties. The next day the witch went to the palace to negotiate with the king, and it was left to the Bear Man to provide for the royal hostage. The Bear Man liked looking after the princess and felt sorry for her. With her wooden limbs and stolen voice, he tried his very best to take good care of her. The Bear Man was in fact very kind, you see, and despised doing evil things. He was happy knowing the witch would not scold him for being kind to the princess. After all, it was the witch herself who had commanded him to look after her. But while the princess did not shed a single tear, neither did she smile so much as once. The Bear Man used the finest ingredients to cook dishes that he hoped would make the princess happy, but when the meals were served, she would do no more than stare at him in total silence. Now the Bear Man knew the princess would only smile when her hands and legs were free again, and she had regained her voice, but the Bear Man could not lift the curses himself, and knew that the witch would never do it. All he could do is continue to cook fine meals for the princess. The princess who wouldn't cry. Several days passed, and still the king would not listen to the witch's demand, just as the princess had foretold. This did nothing for the witch's mood, of course, and one morning when the Bear Man was bringing food to the princess as usual, the witch shouted at him, "Why are you wasting such good food on her? Anything will do, as long as it stops her from crying." "But I thought the princess would be happier if she could eat fine foods, mistress." "Who told you to make her happy?" With that, the witch snatched up her wand and in a flick of her wrist rendered the princess stony deaf. She then proceeded to tell the Bear Man a secret. "There's a reason why I told you to stop her from crying. If she sheds a single tear, all of her curses will be lifted at once." The Bear Man now realized that the witch had not wanted him to be kind to the princess or to look after her. She had simply wanted him to stop her from crying. He now knew that he had to do what he had to do to make the princess happy once more. The next time the witch left the cave, the Bear Man put his paws around the princess's rosy neck and started twisting. Yet she did not cry. The Bear Man felt he had no choice but to strike her. He was strong, and the poor princess was imbalanced on her wooden legs. She fell to the ground violently. "Now cry, I beseech you. Cry, and all your curses will be lifted." The deaf princess lay on the ground clearly in pain, yet still she does not cry. She simply continued to stare directly at the Bear Man. The Bear Man, for his part, resolved to treat the princess with great cruelty. He stopped feeding her, set snakes and insects upon her, and pulled her beautiful golden hair. The Bear Man tried his best to be brutish, but when he looked upon the princess in agony, he felt so sorry for her that he started sobbing, though he hurriedly wiped the tears away with his big paws, knowing he must not let the princess see him crying, it was too late. The princess had realized that something was amiss and resolved not to shed a single tear, no matter what ordeals the bear man put her through. The bear man snarled and bared his teeth and treated the princess more cruelly than ever, but the princess was very brave and very wise, and did not shed a single tear. Tears at last. A month passed, and the witch visited the king once more. When she returned to the cave, this time, however, her mood had changed. The king refused to negotiate. There was no point in keeping a hostage anymore. It's time to kill her. Upon which she waved her wand once more, sending a deadly arrow whistling towards the princess. The bear man immediately threw his great bulk in front of her and shielded her from the arrow, which pierced his chest, and he crashed to the ground. The wand fell from the witch's hand. The bear man's fate was sealed, but with his last morsel of energy, he opened up his eyes and looked up at the princess, and she stared back at him. Her eyes widened. "I have done such terrible things, I will die an evil man in your eyes," such the bear man's sorrowful thoughts as he perished. As he did so, tears fell and fled from the princess's eyes, and raining down her wooden feet and arms, lifting the curse and returning her to normal. The princess immediately stood and picked up the witch's wand and used it to draw a rune. The princess could use magic as well, you see. A large fire engulfed the cave, and the witch's wailing could be heard for miles around. Once the blaze had subsided, nothing remained of the witch, save for a pile of pitch-black ashes. At the moment the bear man was brought back to life as a beautiful young prince, for his dull-witted bear form was nothing but a curse, imposed upon him by the wicked witch. The prince asked in a weak voice, for he was still upon the brink of death, "Your Highness, why did you cry for me? Witnessing your death, it filled me with a terrible sorrow. Had I only known that crying would lift my curse, I should have done so far sooner. I see now that you were trying to help me, even as you did for those horrible things. I treated you terribly, Your Highness. Please forgive me." "Of course I forgive you. You are a kind person at heart, and for that I'm truly grateful. Now please do not die." Upon hearing these words, the prince shed one final tear and breathed his last. Still more. The forbidden spell. The princess stared at the prince's lifeless body for a long while before picking up the wand once more, with conviction. She had settled upon a course of action. She would cast Ashes of Resurrection. Upon casting the spell, the cave was filled with a white light, restoring breath to the prince's lungs as it shone upon him. The prince's spell had brought him back to life. The very moment, however, the princess fell to the ground, and she lay there. She raised her face and asked the princess, "Prince, who are you?" "Ashes of Resurrection is a forbidden spell," he replied mournfully. "Those who cast it always pay a terrible price. The price you have paid is your memory of me." And the princess' eyes filled with tears of terrible sadness once more. "Why are you crying?" asked the puzzled princess. "Because something important has been lost." Upon hearing the princess's next words, however, the prince could not help but smile. "Well, perhaps together we can make it anew." The fifth tale, The Boy Who Would Be God. The Wizard Who Controlled the Clouds. There was once a boy wizard who was endowed with a great deal of magical ability. No sooner was he able to walk than he could cast spells. Spells no other wizard could, controlling the clouds above, making great seas and mighty mountains move at will. In full truth, such feats did the boy more honor than he deserved, for he had not practiced any more diligently than other wizards. His talents were innate, and had been with him since birth. The boy, however, grew up quite certain that he had been blessed by the gods, and came to believe that his rightful place was among them, in heaven itself. No sooner had that thought crossed his mind, than the boy became desirous to make it an immediate reality. Boys who are born with such exceptional powers are seldom accustomed to waiting. A trial from the gods. The boy made for Jabbar al-Dakhan, the highest mountain in all the world, and climbed to its summit. reasoning that the gods would hear him more clearly if he were closer to heaven. Gods, I beseech you to listen. I am more powerful than any wizard. I'm the most powerful wizard in this world. Verily, no man alive is my equal, and thus I believe that my place is in heaven with you. I wish for you to consider me one of your own. Heaven responds with an enormous thunderclap. The boy's wizard's insolence had roused the passion of the gods, and the thunder was followed by a bolt of lightning aimed directly at the boy. But the boy was ready. With a simple wave of his hand, he swatted the lightning away. Do you see, he cried to the gods with glee, do you see how powerful I am? At length a voice responded from the heavens, Boy, if you truly believe yourself to be powerful as a god, then you may have to prove it. By taking this trial, overcome it, and your wish shall be granted. The boy left with great joy upon hearing these words, and believed no trial was beyond his powers. Suddenly, however, everything became quite dark. The boy had no idea where he was. Indeed, his hand could not be seen in front of his face. The boy spoke once more. Boy, this is the world of darkness. Your task is to tolerate it for 8 days. So it's simply a matter of waiting, thought the boy, relieved. That shall not be proved difficult. But the voice went on. There's a door in front of you, boy. Raise your hand and you shall feel it. On the other side of the door is the world of light, where all godly knowledge resides. Enter and you shall become one of us. The door, however, must not be opened until 8 days have passed. With that, the voice fell silent, and all was quiet once more. The boy reached out his hand in front of him. Though he could not see it, the door was there, and just as the voice had said, I shall open the door. The boy said decisively, I shall wait for a full 8 days, and thou shalt become a god, and all will be revealed to me. The 7 days of darkness. At first the boy could do nothing but sit and contemplate his current plight. It was not long, however, before his mind started conjuring all sorts of thoughts. What wonders awaited him when he became one of the gods? What manner of place was this heaven that the gods called home? How would he treat his human minions once he was one of their gods? And so it went on. He found himself increasingly agitated, anxious to see what awaited him once he opened the door to the world of light. He kept his resolve for 6 days and 6 nights, but on the 7th day the boy was overcome by curiosity. In 1 more day I shall become a god, thought the boy. Surely it is of no consequence if I open the door a little early. Oops, a little too far out. He reached the first door once more and traced its even surface. Eventually his hand came across a small protrusion, which felt like the cover of a keyhole. Timidly the boy lifted it and looked through to the other side. A blaze of blinding light flooded through the keyhole, knocking the bowl full cubit backwards. It was incredibly bright, and yet he simply could not close his eyes. The world on the other side of the door was beyond the boy's human imagination. Its scale and beauty seemed to pierce his very soul. The world of the gods, the thought alone made the boy shiver, but even as he did so, he was plunged into darkness once more. The ever-wandering eye. The boy had failed the trial, yet he was still allowed to enter heaven and become one of the gods, for they acknowledged his abilities and showed compassion towards him. They could not, however, show the same compassion towards his eye, the one that had peered at the world of light. The eye was condemned to wander, disembodied through the skies, for all eternity. The boy's wizard's eye traverses the skies to this day, soaring above the birds, gazing down upon the world below. It can never hope to soar as high as the heaven where the gods reside. However, indeed, it is trapped between the human world and the world of the gods forever. Occasionally, when it was overwhelmed with extreme dissatisfaction, the eye swoops down close to the earth's surface, bringing a devastating whirlwind in its wake. These howling gales are known to have destroyed cities and forests, and are rightly feared by ordinary humans, and so the consequences of the boy's wizard's folly are still being felt. Oh, there's the eye. Okay, so the next one. There we go. My other self. Just to make sure. Okay. The sixth tale. My other self. On a hilltop. What follows is an extraordinary story of an ordinary little girl. When I was a little girl, I had the reddest hair you've ever seen, and lived with my mother in a small village tucked away in the hills. I was never any good at magic, but I loved gardening, and could grow all sorts of flowers and medicinal herbs. Behind my house was a low hill, which you could enjoy a wonderful evening view. I used to walk to the top of it every night, to sit on the big old root and watch the sun go down. One day my mother cut her hand on a glass that I had broken, though she washed the wound straight away. Just as she'd always taught me, the cut soon became infected, and by the next morning she had a very high fever. I took care of her the best I could, of course, but several days had passed without any improvement in her condition. The one night after I cried myself to sleep with worry, I woke with a start to find myself standing in front of a strange door. I opened the door and walked through it and emerged upon the top of my favorite hill. I looked just the same as I always did, except for one thing. There was someone else sitting on my root, sobbing quietly. I took a sharp breath and thought to myself, could this girl sitting on the root actually be me? Her hair was just as red as mine, and it glittered like a ruby in the setting sun. The bright blue bird. I was feeling quite sad about myself. The girl sitting on the root seemed absolutely inconsolable. Feeling sorry for her, I asked, "Are you all right? Why are you crying?" At this, the weeping girl lifted her face, giving me another shock. It was exactly like mine. I was careless and my bird flew away, she said. Oh, I did love it so. And that's why you're crying? I've been careless too, as it happens. I made my mother sick. I thought for a moment, then I asked, what kind of bird was it? It was blue, bright blue. It was very beautiful. My mother's eyes are blue as well, I sighed, but they don't seem to sparkle like they did before she took ill. We carried on talking for a little while, and before long we'd become firm friends. She loved gardening too, and was enjoying gazing at the sunset from the crest of the hill. It seemed we had absolutely everything in common, except eventually I said, "Here, take this. It's a flower I grew. It's called a warm welcome, and birds love it. Perhaps it might make your bird come back." I had already put some of these flowers at my mother's bedside to try and make her feel better, as well as some in her hair. "Thank you," said the girl, smiling. "Oh my, it really does smell wonderful. Hey, would you like to come to my house?" I nodded off, and we went down the hill together into the girl's house. She placed the flower I'd given her next to the window. Before long, we heard a sound. Peep, peep, cheep, cheep. And the bird flew in through the window. Chee-chee, shouted the girl. Recognizing her missing pet, the bird had flown straight for the vase that held the flower. It seemed a little unsteady, as though one of its wings was injured. But I couldn't help feeling happy that the warm welcome I'd given the girl had made her bird come back. Waking from a dream, all of a sudden I was in front of a strange door again. I walked through it and I found myself lying in the bed once more. It was just a dream, I sighed. Then I threw off my sheets and went to my mother's room. Much to my surprise, though, I found that she wasn't there. That's when I heard a sound coming from the kitchen and ran downstairs. "Mother," I cried. "Good morning," she replied, cheerily. "You must have been wondering where I had gone to. I just felt so much better when I woke up this morning." "Now then, would you like some breakfast? I'm famished." And my mother's blue eyes were sparkling once more. "Every person in this world has a soulmate. a person in another world with whom they share a soul. Soulmates destined are intertwined, and occasionally they even overlap. So should you ever chance to step through a strange door, do not be surprised if you meet someone just like you. The seventh tale, How the Little Girl Became Queen. The Little Girl. In Xandu, the kingdom of in the clouds, the ruler has always possessed many a mysterious power, not least the ability to make the most prescient of prophecies. This is the story of one such ruler, of whom little was expected when she ascended the throne. Xandu's new ruler was a little girl, cowardly and weak, though it was a peaceful place with a temperate climate, and few, if any, monsters. Xandu had never known a cowardly ruler, and thought alone was simply preposterous. The girl herself knew that she was a coward, having never displayed courage or daring since the moment of her birth. She was scared of sleeping alone, and thought the being in the temple at night filled her with holy dread. Despite claiming that she had a well of courage to draw on, if necessary, she would undoubtedly have been found wanting if she had been asked to deal with a giant or dragon or even a lion. Life surrounded by adults was lonely and dull for a little girl. She had no friends and became very sullen. As a result, everyone assumed that she was humble and wise. For most of those who rise to rule Xandu are powerful sorceresses, and prone to self-importance. Though baseless, the myth of the little girl's wisdom meant that her reign was very peaceful, with none of the tensions or infighting that marred the reigns of her predecessors. Sinister rumors. She had not ruled for long, however, when it became apparent that a dragon had taken up residence near Xandu. In a great cavern measureless to man. Alas, this was no ordinary dragon. Indeed, it was said to be as large as a castle, utterly evil, and endowed with a tail twice 5 miles long. Such sinister rumors grew as sinister rumors always do, and by the time they'd reached the palace, they had the couriers in a state of some excitement. After much frantic discussion, a conclusion was reached. The ruler and the little girl must be sent to deal with the dragon. Though she was still young, everyone believed her to be both wise and brave, and it was concluded that her age was no significance. Thus, having no choice but to fulfill the duty assigned to her, the little girl set off for the dragon's cavern. A savage place, the waning moon cast scarcely any light into the dismal cavern, and big wet drops fell onto the little girl's head as she made her way through the darkness, nervously clutching her wand. Though she quivered with fear, she knew that she had little choice but to push on. She was the ruler of Xandu, and after all, the rulers must show courage, however frightened they might be. Having pushed deep into the cavern, the girl finally encountered the dragon. It was not as bad as she feared, but it would still have ordinarily been more than a match for a little girl like her. The dragon, however, was injured. One of his wings was broken, and he was unable to fly. Indeed, he had no way at all of avoiding the little girl's spells. It seemed the tables had turned in her favor. Just then the dragon turned to her and said, "You come alone. I suppose you knew I was injured. I shall surely perish soon. All you need to do is wait, and your duty shall be fulfilled." But the girl took out her wand and proceeded to draw a rune. The spell she cast began to heal the dragon's wounds. Being so young, it took a long time for her healing magic to work, but her concentration never wavered. "Heal me, and I could come after you and eat you. Are you sure you want what you are doing?" It's a smaller dragon, though. The little girl thought for a moment before replying politely. I should not like to be eaten, yet I do not want to see why you should die. Perhaps we could reach an agreement instead. I will heal your wing if you swear to spare this kingdom." The dragon made no reply and simply gazed at the girl with flashing eyes. Once his wing had been fully healed, the dragon picked up the little girl, placing her on his broad back. Strode out of the cavern, and then flexing his newly healed wing, he carried the girl to the summit of a tall mountain. As the dragon reached the top of the mountain, it seemed to grow in front of the girl's eyes. At last, it became to resemble the castle-sized dragon that the courtiers of Xandu had mentioned. Indeed, it began to look as though it could eat a castle thrice over. "This is my true self," declared the dragon. "Now you may be weak, but you are both courageous and kind. My original intent was to eat every one of your subjects, but I have decided to honor our bargain and spare this kingdom." The dragon's kind words touched the little girl deeply, and the two of them became great friends. Then the dragon shrank back to his smaller size and put the girl on his back again. Together they made for Xandu. When they reached the city, however, the dragon grew big once more, and the little girl explained that what had happened to her courtiers. They realized not only that she was wise and brave, but she was also very kind. From that moment on, she was no longer referred to the little girl. She had become the Queen of the Heavens. She never forgot her dragon friend, and they spoke together often until the end of their days. The eighth tale, The Shepherd Boy. The lazy son. Two shepherds who were father and son worked together in the fields. The father looked after sheep from morning till night, constantly patrolling the pasture and looking out for wolves. The son, however, spent every day at his leisure, staring into the distance and not lifting a finger to help his father. One day the father turned to his son and said with regret, "I am getting old and shall soon be retiring. Though you are my only son, it becomes clear to me that you have no enthusiasm for shepherding. I am starting to think that I should be better entrusting my flock to someone else." The son was quite shocked, for the flock was his only livelihood, and resolved to start assisting his father in the fields, chasing sheep, tending the grass, and so on. Alas, he soon grew tired of such tasks. At a loss as to what to do, the son supposed he should pay a visit to the old Father Oak, an ancient tree in the deep dark wood, possessed with infinite wisdom on all matters. "Oh, old Father Oak, is there not some manner of fruit that I can swallow to excite my enthusiasm?" The son asked in vexation. "I am afraid that such things do not exist," replied old Father Oak. "There is, however, a fountain hidden deep within a nearby forest. Drinking of its water provides a godly dose of energy." The fountain. The son traveled in the direction indicated by old Father Oak. Till he came to the fountain, he tested its cool surface with his hand. "I shall take some of this water home with me," he thought, before realizing that he had no vessel in which to carry it. "Alas, I must return home empty-handed," he lamented. The son was about to go back and fetch a jug when he decided to sample a mouthful of fountain's water. Sure enough, he immediately felt the great surge of energy that the old Father Oak had predicted, and used his axe to chop down a nearby tree, carving it into a pitcher that was almost as big as himself. Once the pitcher was finished, the son filled it with water from the fountain and made for home. The vessel was very heavy, and the journey was a long one. He nearly gave up on several occasions. Every time he felt like abandoning his journey, he would stop by the wayside and take another gulp of water from the pitcher, and eventually he arrived back home. I have water enough here to last a lifetime," the son thought with a sigh of relief. He was very weary and fell into bed to sleep soundly till morning. The pitcher. The son awoke from his slumber and resolved to take another drink from the water from the pitcher. "Oh, how full of life I am!" exclaimed happily, and set about his duty in double the usual speed. And he did so. He resolved that no one else must be allowed to drink this precious water in this pitcher. In the days that followed, the son spent much of his time ensuring that no one went near his pitcher. He took care to attend to his chores while he did so, knowing that his father would otherwise be angry whenever a villager approached the pitcher for a drink of water. The son would interrupt his own labors and offer a cup of a different water, thus preventing any of the water in his pitcher was going to waste. He was also reluctant to waste the water from the fountain on himself, and so worked hard every day without touching it. Then one day, a very hot day, after the sun had been hard at work in the fields, he realized that a terrible thing had happened. The water had evaporated in the searing heat of the sun. When the son realized that the water upon which his future depended had disappeared, he was overcome with despair and collapsed upon the grass. The sight of the son lying prone excited the villagers' concern, and they rushed to see if he was all right, for the son had gained reputation in the village for being kind and hardworking on account of all the cups of water he was wont to provide thirsty villagers. So the villagers gave the son a drink of water as he lay there, and he was amazed at how delicious it tasted. It was the freshest, cleanest water he'd ever drank, and what's more, it gave him a same surge of energy that the water from the fountain had done. His father stood next to him and said kindly, "No matter what water on earth can compare to the first water you drink after sweating all day. Why, I should think it is a fair sight better than the water from the fountain." For the father knew that the son had visited the fountain. The son rose to his feet and smiled back at his father. "You're right, father. It truly is better by far. Hard toil brings in its own rewards." The Ninth Tale, The Flute Makers. 4 brothers. In a certain kingdom there once lived 4 brothers. Though their parents had both died and had grown up poor, the brothers had become famous and highly regarded. The first brother was very strong. Once when the kingdom was in need of a new lake, he had lifted a stone bigger than 3 dragons out of the ground, creating a great hollow. He then carried the stone to the top of the tallest mountain in the land. Lest it prove an eyesore to anyone, the king could not contain his delight as he watched the hollow slowly filling with water. The second brother was the greatest artist in the land. He went to the top of the mountain and carved wonderful sculptures from the stone that his brother had carried there, and offered them to the king, who was rendered speechless for the first time in his life by their beauty. The third brother was known as a master craftsman. He took the sculptures that his brother had made and erected sturdy walls between them, creating a mighty castle. He even used the remaining pieces of stone to build a working clock. The king was amazed at how it always told the correct time despite being made of stone. The king now had a new castle that he believed was the most beautiful and the best defended, the most convenient in the wide world. The brothers were delighted and became full of confidence, for each of them believed they were the greatest man alive. "I am the one the king should thank for having such a wonderful castle after all. I am the one who carried that stone all the way up the mountain. Thou mayest have carved the stones, and thou mayest have bound them together. But had I not brought the stone up there in the first place, nothing of that could have been done," said the first brother. But the king would not have looked twice at the castle had I not carved those sculptures so beautifully," retorted the second brother. "And yet I was the one who took thy sculptures and made them into a castle. What use hath the kingdom for sculptures, pray tell? Beautiful they must be." After some time, these discussions became so fractious that the 3 brothers resolved to live apart on the eastern, western, and southern edges of the kingdom. The youngest brother of the 4 was unlike his 3 other older brothers. He excelled at nothing, and was weak and clumsy. Though his older brothers would mock him constantly, the youngest brother was a docile sort, and did not pay much heed to such insults. He was, however, worried about his brothers living apart, and he resolved to pay each of them a separate visit. A thick fog. A short while later, a disaster befell the kingdom. A thick fog covered the entire land, blocking all sunlight For 100 days, crops would not grow and people became unwell, and yet very worst of it was the fog that put an end to all music, for it simply could not be heard through the very heavy broom. The whole kingdom adopted a silent funeral air, and still the source of the fog remained a mystery. One night, as the king slept fitfully, he had a strange dream. In it, someone was telling him that the only way to clear the fog was to play a certain flute, the most beauteous flute in the world. Upon waking, the king immediately summoned the three brothers who had built the castle, and commanded them to build such a flute. Since the three brothers no longer spoke to one another, however, they would not cooperate with each, and each went off to carve his own. "I am the only one capable of making a flute fit for a king," said one brother. "It is simply too great of a feat for the two of you." Thou mightest better say thou of thine own self," countered the second. "My flute will be the finest, and thou shalt soon see." "Boast if you will," scoffed the third. "All men know that mine will be the best." And so the arguments continued. After some time, all three brothers finished making their flutes, and went to present them to the king and his subjects. The kingdom gathered on the shores of the lake that had been created by the first brother, anxious for the presentation to begin. The first brother picked up his flute, which was big and made out of stone. He blew and blew. Try as he might, however, the flute would not produce a sound. The king soon turned his attention to the second brother. His flute was beautiful, delicate instrument made of clay. When he blew it produced no sound. The king was now becoming rather agitated, and hastily commanded the third brother to blow his flute. It was made of a single bone, with holes drilled in the appropriate places, yet it too could produce not a single tone or note. The king was furious and banished the brothers from his sight. The world's greatest flute. Several days later, the king awoke to hear the song of the flute that he had dreamed about. It was a beautiful sound and cleansed the heart, and brought tears to the eyes of the royals, ministers, soldiers, ploughmen, and even the baker's cat, whom many had thought deaf. As the flute played on, the thick fog had been plagued the kingdom began to clear. The king was naturally delighted, and started searching for the source of this blissful sound. Trusting to the evidence of his ears, the king came at last to the house of the fourth brother. There he found him and his three brothers sitting together, with their tears in their eyes. The king began to extend his warmest gratitude to the youngest brother, but he was politely interrupted. "Alas, the flute was not my work. My three brothers built it." Sorry about that. Moving a little bit. Okay. "Alas, the flute was not my work. My three brothers built it." And he proceeded to explain all that had come to pass. The youngest brother had been visiting his three brothers every day, hoping to persuade them to work together as before, but his brothers were stubborn and would not listen. After some time traveling hither and thither, from south, east, west, and back again, all the young brother's efforts got the better of him, and he collapsed in a heap. When his three elder brothers heard what had happened, they all felt sorry for their youngest sibling, and went to visit him as he recovered. The eldest brother visited him first. "Is there aught I can do for you?" he asked. "Indeed there is. Hie thee to the forest, and cut down the tallest tree thou findest, chop it down into small pieces, and bring them here to me." Thinking his brother wanted firewood to keep him warm under the thick fog, the first brother agreed to do as he was asked. "Very well, young brother," he asked. "I shall start cutting right away." Thank you, the youngest brother replied from his bed, and before long the first brother came back, a smile on his face, and a pile of logs under his arms. The next day the second brother came to visit his youngest sibling. "Is there aught I can do for you?" he asked, upon which the youngest brother brought out one of the logs the first brother had cut for him. "Indeed there is. Carve this wood into something beautiful for me, perhaps a pipe." Thinking the brother wanted an ornament in his home To make him feel better, the second brother agreed without the slightest hesitation. "Very well, younger brother," he said. "I shall start carving away. Right away." "Thank you," the youngest brother replied from his bed, and before long the first brother came back, a beautiful wooden pipe under his arm. The next day, the third brother came to visit his youngest sibling. "Is there aught I can do for you?" he asked upon the youngest brother brought out the pipe that his second brother had carved. "Indeed there is. Would thou be so good as to drill some holes into this pipe for me?" Thinking the brother wanted something to entertain himself with while he was ill, the third brother gladly agreed. "Thank you," the youngest brother from his bed said the youngest brother from his bed when the older brother had returned with the finished pipe. "But I actually have one more request." "Of course, younger brother. What is it?" "Call our two brothers and tell them to come here." Though the third brother hated his older brothers, he could scarce refuse his ailing sibling's request. So piteous did he seem, and he agreed to go and fetch them. Despite all being gathered beneath the same roof, and the three brothers would not look at each other, much less speak. Then, in the midst of the silence, the youngest brother pulled out the flute they had made and lifted it to his lips. As soon as he began to play, the three brothers began to weep, realizing how foolish they had been. As they listened to the sound of the flute, they recalled the past that they had shared, their humbled home, their parents who had loved them so, the days when they had supported each other and helped each other before they won fame. The four brothers continued to weep, and they realized that each one was only truly special when he worked with the others, all four of them indeed, for it was only the youngest brother who could produce a pure note from their flute. The tears they wept were the most beautiful tears they would had ever seen, for they were tears of love. After the king had finished listening to the youngest brother's story, he decided to give all four brothers a special medal. From that day onwards, the brothers agreed to always work together, and they all lived happily ever after. The 10th tale, The Flying Machine. The Dreamer. There once was a boy who spent every day in their days dreaming of soaring through the skies. As a young child, he always asking wizards to make him float for a few moments. A delightful experience, but he himself was no good at magic. Since he always also hated lessons of any kinds, there was really no hope for him becoming a wizard, but still dreamed of being able to fly. Nothing could make him give up on his dreams. One day the boy took a journey to another world. There was a tunnel that connected the two worlds in those days, you see. The people were able to travel between them quite easily. Now the boy knew that there was no such thing as magic in the other world, meaning that no one there was able to fly. He had, however, heard rumors about a painter who lived there, and who had also dreamed of taking to the skies just like he did. As soon as he arrived to the other world, the boy headed straight to the front for the painter's house. But when he got there was no one home. Feeling rather bold, the boy decided to look around for himself. The first thing he saw upon entering the painter's house was a magnificent sketch, a drawing of a strange machine that was attached to something that spun very quickly. There was no doubt about it. This was a machine that could fly. What a shame, thought the boy, that in my world magic is so common that no one bothers inventing things like this. Flushed with excitement, the boy took a tracing of the painter's sketch and took it back with him to his world. After working hard for several years, the boy finished building the machine in the sketch, and for the first time ever he was able to fly, for this was the happiest moment of his life, thought the boy with a big grin. Even though it was only a few seconds at a time, he was able to live his dream. The Sage and the Young Wizard. A short while after he finished building the painter's flying machine, a sage visited the boy and spoke to him very grandly. "You dispose of all knowledge gleaned from another world." The boy was shocked. "But why?" he asked. The machine lets me soar through the skies. It's what I've always wanted. Using a machine to achieve something that should only be achieved using magic is akin to poisoning this world. Poison? Why is it like poison? Magic may only be used by those who possess a pure heart, for who have undergone the proper training. The wizard borrow some of the nature's powers and use it to the human's benefits. Only those with a pure heart and one uncorrupted by evil are able to do this. Using machines to triumph over nature is not behavior of the pure-hearted. Now that what the sage meant was that anyone could use a machine to manipulate nature, even the untrained and the evil. Machines gave ordinary humans powers that only gods and wizards should have. Though it hurt to admit, the boy knew that what the sage had said was true, and very reluctantly handed over his tracing of the painter's sketch, and he did so. As he did so, however, the young wizard who had been watching them interjected. Esteemed sage, wasn't magic originally intended to make our lives easier? If machines achieve the same effect, why shouldn't we use them? Because machines could be used by wrong people, for the wrong reasons, replied the sage impatiently. But the young wizard was undeterred. I have been to the other world, and I know how things work there. They have people called scientists, and they are the ones who make the machines, and they work miracles. They are capable of mixing iron and other rare metals to create things called alloys, which are strong enough to plow even the rockiest of soil. You cannot deny that farmers' lives are much easier as a result. Surely you do not believe that all scientists seek to improve people's lives, the sage snapped back. Do not think, perhaps, that some of them wish to use their machines to control people, bend them to their will. The young wizard was speechless for a moment, but he soon found his tongue again. Couldn't the same be said for magic? Aren't there some people who seek to use magic to increase their own influence? The boy tried listening to the conversation between the sage and the young wizard, but they used a lot of difficult words, and he had been in trouble following it. All he wanted to do, after all, was fly, a dream come true. In the years that followed, more and more people made visits to this other world. They would become increasingly surprised and impressed by the machines they saw there, and would rush back to their own world to tell people all about them. The sages realized that something must be done because technology from the other world was threatening to ruin the balance of their own. They decided to seal the tunnel to the other world to ensure that the place of magic within society was never threatened again. Now, visiting the other world was not completely forbidden. Why, powerful wizards could cast a spell known as Gateway and travel to the other world at any time they pleased. When the boy was a young man by now, heard about what the sages had done, he had felt was terribly disappointed. Dash it all, he thought, now I'll never be able to visit the other world again. And yet he still dreamed of flying. If anything, he dreamed of it more than ever. Having thought about it every day for a long time, he eventually had an idea. What if I build a flying machine that's powered by magic? Surely the sages couldn't object to that. I shall make it magical. But I shall jolly well build it and fly it as I like. Many months of hard work later, the young man's magical flying machine was complete. Its magical power had been provided by, yes, you guessed it, the young wizard who had the argument with the sage all those years ago. Once the final touches had been applied, it was time for a test flight. The young man straddled his machine and took off to the sky. The machine's wings flipped gently as it glided through the air, and its magically enchanted engine allowed him to stay in the sky for several hours. Midway through the test flight, he looked down. In the sheep in the forest there was as small as dormice, and he could see the waves of the sea in the distance glinting in the morning sun. I don't think anyone alive has ever felt happier, thought the man with glee. Indeed, he was too captivated by the scenery to spare thought for the effect his new magical machine would have on the world. He had known what impact Had he only known what impact it would have, he can be sure he would not have been quite so elated. Oh. The 11th tale. Tree in the Stone. Just wondering how long this one is. Okay. So it's just a couple more pages left. Yep. Okay. The 11th tale. The Tree in the Stone. The great tree in the deep dark wood. The deep dark wood is a dense green forest located in the northern part of the continent, now known as the Summerlands. Though there's beautiful crystal clear waterfalls and other sights of minor interest, travelers mainly flock to the deep dark wood on account of the great tree known as Old Father Oak. Princes, paupers alike have all long visited this tree in hope of gleaning some understanding from him. For Old Father Oak's great wisdom and benevolence have led men to consider him the world's elder, though no such title officially exists. Young Tree's journey. There was nothing unusual about the tree that became known as Old Father Oak. When he was first green shoots emerged from the ground. Many centuries ago, the tree grew as all trees grow. Year on year, his branches reaching upward in search of sunlight, and his roots thrusting downwards in search of water. One day, when he was still but a young sapling, he was dug up by a group of humans, and a large stone was placed beneath him, just below his roots. He was then replanted on top of the stone, the hole around him refilled with soil, and the humans recited an incantation that drew a rune. When the ceremony was over, they retreated from the forest. Now the presence of the stone made life difficult for the young tree. No matter how hard he tried to stretch his roots, the stone meant that they simply could not reach any further into the ground. After several days of trying, the tree was about to give up when all of a sudden the stone started speaking to him. "Tell me, what can you see from up there? Pray tell me what you can see, for I am no ordinary rock. One day I shall be a magical stone, and a great and very important one." The tree was very surprised to hear the stone talking to him so casually and not a little vexed. "And why should I tell you anything? You do nothing but get in the way of my roots." The tree uttered these words much of his own surprise, for he had never been able to speak before. And so the stone began explaining his situation to the tree. It appeared that in order for the stone to become a magic stone, they had placed beneath the roots of a tree and enchanted in a special ceremony. And so, as the tree grew older and wiser, he would impart some of his wisdom onto the stone, allow the stone's own magical power to develop. The tree's ability to talk was simply one of the things he had learned as he had grown, and the stone had learned this from the tree. Armed with newfound talent, the tree began talking to the birds and the fairies and the other forest creatures, and upon hearing the tales of the outside world, and developed an insatiable desire to travel, to leave the spot to which he was rooted, and so he began pulling at his roots until the cracks appeared in the ground, and he kept pulling day after day, unable to stop or be stopped until eventually the inevitable happened. The great creaking sound. The tree wrenched himself and his short roots out of the ground together. It was at this moment that the young tree discovered that he knew how to walk, and resolved to leave the deep dark wood immediately and make for pastures new. The stone felt very sad to see his only friend in the world preparing to leave, and said, "Promise that you will come back and see me sometime, won't you, young tree? I should like nothing more than to hear all about your travels." "Of course I shall come back to see you, I promise." And so the tree set off on his journey. He felt sorry for the stone, who now never became the magic stone he so wanted to be. But he knew he had to follow his own dreams. The young tree's journey allowed him to acquire great wisdom, Every time that he encountered perils or monsters, he would simply stand stock still and pretend to be an ordinary tree. Should a predator come sniffing the young tree, would wait until he was very close before rustling his branches violently and giving the creature a terrible fright, and sending it scuttling away in fear. Promise to the stone. The tree's journey continued through the storms and blizzards into dank, black caves and across deep blue oceans. On the way, he would sometimes meet other trees or journeys of their own. Most of the trees he had encountered had also been chosen as locations for burying magical stones. They too had left their stones behind and set out on their own adventures. He also encountered trees that were broken, withered, becoming lost in the desert, or trapped in just great snowfalls. One day, several months into his journey, the young tree realized that it was becoming more and more difficult for him to move. No matter how much fresh water he drank, or how pleasant the sun felt upon his leaves, he was becoming slower and slower. This must be what happened to all those dead trees I saw, the tree thought. And what's going to happen to me? Suddenly the tree remembered the promise he made to the stone back in the deep dark wood. His promise to return to the forest and tell the stone all about his travels. The young tree had not visited the stone once since that day. Indeed, he completely forgot about him. I should go back, he thought. I should return and speak to the stone while I still have strength enough to move. And so the tree set off home, back to the deep dark wood, and the tree's short branches were dragging behind him all the way, trying to get him to stop. But the tree ignored them. Eventually he made his way back to the forest, and he was where he first sprouted from the ground. The sight of his old stone companion, however, gave him a real shock. Having failed to become magical, the stone had been mistaken for an ordinary rock, and most of him had been chucked off and carried away to make tools and other objects. Only a tiny piece of him remained. Undeterred, the young tree proceeded to recount all the travels, stories, and little stone listened to every one in silent wonder. What happened next? When the tree had finished telling the stone the last of his tales, he thought to himself, "Now that I have fulfilled my promise to the stone, I shall not mind if I wither and die where I stand." Curiously, however, the tree noticed that he was feeling far healthier than he had for a long while. It turned out that much as the stone's ability to talk had come from the tree's ability to walk had come from being near the stone. As he spent more and more time away from the stone, the tree had started to lose his power, and now understood that unfortunate dead trees, and seen on his travel, had lost the power of movement on account of neglecting to visit their stone companions. The tiny stone in the tree, who was no longer very young, formed a firm alliance and became inseparable friends. Indeed, the tree placed the stone into a hollow in his trunk, allowing him to share all his knowledge and wisdom. The two would occasionally go on journeys together in acquiring even greater experience and wisdom, for it turns out that while the stone had not become magical during the tree's long absence, he became incredibly knowledgeable. As the years went by, the tree and the stone garnered great repute for their surpassing wisdom, becoming known as the Old Father Oak and the Telling Stone, respectively. Indeed, to this day, the travelers still venture into the deep dark wood, seeking advice from this most unlikely pairing of tree and stone. And so ends this branch of the story of Old Father Oak and the Telling Stone. The 12th and final tale, The Young Woman's Journal. An old traveler stood on a street corner, telling a crowd of people all about his adventures. The crowd enjoyed listening to his tale, and one of them asked him, "What is your most incredible thing you have seen?" The old traveler thought for a while, and answered, "Let me tell you about a notebook I found. I was traveling through some truly inhospitable terrain, a jungle so thick that no light passed through its canopy. Located in the foothills of a steep mountain range, I was certain that I was the first human to set foot in this place. Until I came upon a notebook. Imagine my surprise when I looked inside and saw it was a young girl's journal. I became obsessed with it. I couldn't stop thinking about this little girl and what had happened to her. Listen to these entries. Did you ever hear of a tale so wondrous as hers? Oops. Okay. I wonder where you've gone. I've been looking for you all this time, but I can't find you anywhere. Passing through the village today, I heard some people talking about you. They describe you a little differently from what I remember, but it was definitely you. They say you were heading north, so that is where I shall go too. I don't believe it. They say you've thrown yourself in some kind of swamp. Something called the Miasma Marshes. Why would you do such a thing? What am I going to do now? I finally found someone who could tell me about these Miasma Marshes. It doesn't sound good. It seems that those who gaze at the marshes are lured towards them by the evil spirits who reside there. They prey on those who've been overcome by despair and compel them to throw themselves in. Is that what happened to you? I finally understand the mystery of the Miasma Marshes. Well, I know what I have to do. Last night, a traveling wizard told me that people in this world share a soul with the person in another world. These people are called soulmates. According to him, soulmates' lives are intertwined and affect each other. By throwing themselves into the Miasma Marshes, however, people can cut the bond that links them to their soulmates, allowing their hearts to be consumed by evil. Those who have done so are beyond redemption, even releasing the evil from their hearts and reconnecting them to their soulmates does not bring the person they once were. He told me something else as well, something important I need some time to think about what to do next. It is decided I must become a wizard. It is the only way I can save you. It is several years since I last wrote in this journal. I am a great sage now, capable of breaching time itself. I've decided to go and rescue the other you. I'm going to take good care of him, right from the very start. I know I'll never be able to return to this time, but I will not regret this. In the other world, I'll find the floating soul to which you were once connected, and I will absorb it. The soul will then be reborn as my own child. I'm setting out on a long journey to acquire the life that I need in order to save you. That is the least I can do for you. After what you did for me, I believe that one day your soul will return, and that we'll meet again. You saved me. You sacrificed everything for me. You gave your life so I could live mine. I must see you again. After the old traveler finished reading the journal, the crowd had been assembled before him, and stood silently for a long while. Before any of them could think of what to say, the old traveler turned around and shuffled off to continue his wanderings. But just as he was about to leave the town, he looked back at his dumbstruck audience and addressed them once again. The notebook wasn't the only thing I found that day. There was also a wand lying next to it. I think it must have been hers. And that was probably Alicia. I believe. I'm not sure. It could be. Sounds like the tale of Shadar and Alicia. But that will be the end of the series. Thank y'all for watching, being spooky, and thank you for listening to the 12 Tales of Wonder. And I'll see you all in my next game series. See you in the next one. Peace out. Boys and girls, I just want to take a second and say to go and check out my friends' channels on the channel section on my page. And one of them will be on the ending of this video, on the ending card. Please go check them out. They're all pretty cool people. Okay. See y'all later. Have a great day. Peace out. And keep being spooky.